Okay, good morning. My name is Itzik Mantin. I'm from Imperva, and I'm going to talk about the Bar Mitzvah attack, breaking SSL with a 13-year-old RC4 weakness. I'm sorry that we don't start in time, just because the keynote was late, so they asked me to start a little later, but I will try to finish until 11:15 to get so all of us can get to our break. So, what is Bar Mitzvah and why Bar Mitzvah? So, according to the Jewish tradition, when a boy becomes 13, he's becoming accountable for their actions. So, this is some kind of a Jewish ceremony. And the attack is based on discovery of a weakness in RC4, which I participated also in this research, which was done 13 years ago. And the weakness I'm talking about is called the invariance weakness. It was first published in the FMS paper I published with Scott Fleur from Cisco and Adi Shamir from the Weizmann Institute back in 2001. And it was also part of my master research many years ago. So I'll show a couple of things giving the background for TLS, what are the objectives of TLS, and the current security of TLS. Then I will give the background on RC4. I will go into details on what is the invariance weakness in RC4 and what is its security implications. Then I will show several attacks that can be mounted using this vulnerability of RC4 when RC4 is the cipher that is used in TLS, and I will finalize with conclusions. So TLS, on the previous name it was SSL. It is the protocol that protects the internet used for TCP communication. The most usable version of it is HTTPS. SSL3 released in 1996, and we have TLS1 from 1999, TLS 1.1 in 2006, and 1.2. TLS 1.3 is being developed in these days, probably will be finalized until the end of this year. This is more or less the support of the different versions of SSL. This is taken, by the way, from a very nice website, SSL Pulse, giving a lot of SSL statistics I used from there. So as you can see, the TLS version 1.0 is supported by almost every implementation, by almost all the servers. And TLS 1.1 and 1.2 are still about 50% deployment. What are the objectives of TLS? Well, TLS comes to guarantees several things. The first one, it allows the mutual authentication between the server and the client. So the client, the browser, can authenticate the server. The server, on the other hand, can authenticate the client, even though it is, in most of the cases, it is not, the second party is not used. Once they authenticate each other, TLS provides a capability to protect all the data that is transmitted between the parties, which means, in cryptography, it means to encrypt it, to provide the data confidentiality, and to authenticate it, meaning to provide the data integrity. So what are the models where TLS should work? It should work first in the passive model, where the attacker is just being in the line between the client and the server. He only eavesdrops. And in this model, SSL is supposed to provide security, which is quite clear. A more complicated setup, which is harder to obtain from the attacker point of view, but is also harder to protect. But given that it happens, it is harder to protect against that. But SSL does that in most of the cases. Is where the attacker is what the so-called man in the middle. So there is this Alice wanting to communicate to her Facebook account, and the attacker is here in the middle. He takes everything that Alice sends. He takes it. It can send it to Facebook. It can just keep it. It can generate new packets of its own or new requests. It can do whatever it wants. And also in this model, TLS is providing security. And we will discuss these two modes in details in the continuation of this lecture. In the last couple of years, there were quite many attacks on SSL. I think the first one that started this SSL attacks era is the Beast attack. Another one was an attack on the usage of RC4 in TLS. Two other attacks on the compression methods, crime and time and breach. Several attacks that used the different weaknesses in the protocol negotiation to make the parties downgrade using a less secure operation like the Poodle and the Freak. Padding Oracle attacks like Lucky 13, and implementation attacks usually on OpenSSL, but sometimes also on other implementations like Heartbleed, and also the Freak attack is a downgrade attack that is specific to OpenSSL. Let's go to RC4. So this is the statistics that I downloaded on March 9 of the usage of RC4. I think the most important thing here, you can see that 51.2% of the servers that were participating in these statistics support some version of RC4, but this is not the most important statistics. I think the most important one is this one. 23.3 are used with modern browsers, meaning that in many cases, in 1 out of 4 cases, servers that work with a modern browser that supports the many variants of SSL and TLS and a lot of very secure cipher seats still chooses to work with RC4, even though it is not the strongest cipher. This input is very significant. RC4 is a stream cipher. Now, the way stream ciphers work is there is an algorithm that is called a key stream generator, which takes a key and generates a random key stream from it. And then this random key stream is being XORed with the plaintext. This is the plaintext, and that produces the ciphertext. The XOR operation has a very, very useful attribute from a cryptographic point of view, because if this key stream is completely random or pseudo-random, then it provides maximal security, complete security. If it is not random, then it does not provide security. And this is more or less the thing that is problematic with RC4. RC4 is short for Revest Code 4. There are also RC2, RC5, and RC6. For about 30 years, it is the most popular stream cipher in the world. It was the details of RC4 were kept as a trade secret of RSA until the 2001, where an effective attack on a practical attack on WEP protocol was published, and RSA had to admit that this is indeed the algorithm, and that it is indeed problematic in WEP protocol. This is how RC4 looks like. It is very. I think this is one of the reasons that it is against that popularity, because as you can see, it is only like 4 or 5 lines of code for the key scheduling part, and another 4 lines in the pseudo-random generation part. So it is very popular. You can just remember it, in your head, unlike most of the other ciphers, which are impossible. And essentially, it has a state where the state is this permutation of the numbers from 0 to 255. And there are two indices in this state, I and J, where on every, in order to generate a new key stream byte, RC4 advances this I, this index, by 1. It advances J by a pseudo-random variable, which is S of I. And then it uses both of them to emit another byte. And it was believed for many years that this algorithm is secure and provides a randomness. However, RC4 is not really pseudo-random. It's supposed to be pseudo-random, but it is not. It is known from the year of 2000. There was a distinguisher of RC4 that was published in the year 2000 by Fleur and Meguru. These patterns, by the way, were used by an attack on RC4 in TLS about 2 years ago. There is also a distinguisher of 2 to the 26, which is essentially like 64 million bytes of RC4, which I published in 2005. And there is also a prediction algorithm that waits that in one event out of 2 to the 45 bytes can predict what the next bits are going to be, prediction attack. However, when you the most important problem with RC4 is not that it is not pseudo-random in the generation, in the key stream. The most important thing is that all this, the key scheduling algorithm, which takes a key and translates it into a permutation, and the beginning of the pseudo-random generation are extremely weak. It is known for, since 2001, that this is the weakest link of RC4. There are biases in the key stream. There is the second byte bias that, again, part of my master thesis, that the second byte has a double probability to be 0. And there are many other biases. There are many correlations between the key that is used and the key stream that is generated. And now these correlations are very dangerous, because if one have the idea about what are the first key stream bytes, he can deduce what was the key that was used. So the IV weakness that was used for a practical web attack, another version of the web attack that was able to work even when you throw away the first 256 bytes of RC4, and a faster web attack in 2007. More key to key stream correlations were published in 2005. Another type of weaknesses in the initialization algorithm is that the initial permutation bytes are the first state that RC4 starts to work with is completely not random. There are very strong biases in many cases there. But the weakness that I'm going to focus in this session is the invariance weakness, which was, as I said, published in the Fleur, Mantin, Shamir paper. So what is the invariance weakness? In this FMS research, we described two weaknesses. The first one we call the IV weakness. The other one we call the invariance weakness. The first one got a lot of attention because it was used to attack and to mount a practical attack on an actual protocol, WEP. The second one was left in the shadows for 13 years. So now it is time to see the light. The idea of the invariance weakness is a class of RC4 weak keys. It is a very large class. Every RC4 key has a probability of 2 to the minus 24, which is 1 to 16 million, to get this to be in this class. So this is, in cryptography terms, this is a very significant number. And when such key is used, there is a very, very bad mixing of the key with the permutation. So essentially, the permutation that RC4 starts to work with has a part of it that remains intact for the entire key scheduling algorithm. Now, since the key scheduling algorithm starts with the identity permutation, which is all the numbers from 0 to 255 ordered, then this part remains the same at the beginning of the stream. The way it looks, I hope you can see it from here. So I will not go to all the details of this weakness, because I want to focus most of this presentation to how to use it for the attack on TLS. This is all old news. So if you have the least significant, you can think of it as the key that is used by RC4, and each column here is a byte of the key, where the most significant bit is the top one, and the least significant bit is the bottom one. So whenever there is some pattern in the LSBs, in the least significant bits of the entire key, then this pattern is translated into a pattern in the permutation and into a pattern in the key stream. Meaning that if you have this pattern in the least significant bits, then you can predict what are going to be the least significant bits of the key stream. Now, in addition to the least significant bits, there is also all the entire first byte that need to be set for some very technical reasons, and these additional bits that need to be set for more technical reasons. But essentially, if you have a key that has all these bits set, then you will get a permutation that you know all the least significant bits of it. And furthermore, you know the first key stream, the least significant bits of the first key stream bytes. So this is the invariance weakness. Okay, now I said that this is 1 to the 16 million. Now the reason is that this attack can work on any number of least significant bits that you choose. For example, it can work on a single one, and then you get this 2 to the 34 to the 24. You can work with 2 least significant bits and more. But the largest class is the one that is for a single LSB. So essentially, this is the technical details of the attack, that if every bit of the key, every byte of the key is satisfying this equation, then all the swaps in the key scheduling are actually between an odd number and an odd number, and an even number with an even number. So we call this preservation of the least significant bits by the swaps. So as I said, the final permutation in every in the location 0, you're guaranteed to have a value that has LSB 0, and same for all the others. So we have an initial an LSB leakage in the initial permutation. However, every swap when the pseudo-random generation works is ruining this very delicate situation. Every swap is between an odd index and an even index. So we do have a leakage of the plaintext bits. However, we need to somehow cope with these swaps. And this is the reason that this pattern in the key stream begins with very high probability, but continues with probability that goes lower and lower until it vanishes. These are the numbers and the sizes of the different classes of weak keys. As I said, it is the largest one for a 16-byte key. The size is 2 to the minus 24 from the entire RC4 key space. For shorter keys, for example, 8-byte keys, it is 2 to the minus 16. By the way, when you are using keys that are of odd size, this attack doesn't work. It works only for even length of keys. Again, for technical reasons, which I'm not going to get into. But also want to mention that. And if you want to focus on 2 LSBs or 3 LSBs, then the sizes go and drop. Okay, so we know that when a weak key is used, many plaintext bits leak? So there are two questions that we need to answer. The first one, can we tell when we had a weak key? Because if we can't tell when we had a weak key, then we cannot detect the correct event, and we cannot know when we have this bits leaks. Now, the answer is we can, because in many cases, the encryption is of data that is already partially known. There are headers that are being encrypted, and there is statistics of the data that you're encrypting. So it is easy to know in many cases what are the bits that are that this event has occurred, because we see the ciphertext and we know the plaintext, so we can see also the key stream for some parts, and then we can know that this pattern actually occurred. Another question, probably more important, is how many bits can we predict? And I'm not sure if you can see this. I'll try to maybe enlarge it. Okay, I can't enlarge it. But what you can see here is that the probability, this is the line of 0.5, which is what you would expect to predict a bit if the PRNG had worked perfectly. And we start with 0.7. This is the prediction probability of the first LSB. And this number goes and drops until it vanishes around 35 or 40. Now, this is really bad news for the attack, because the first 36 bytes that are encrypted with RC4, when used in TLS, are the finished message of the handshaking protocol, which is nothing that we can do with. So we had to find a way to improve this. The reason that we have this degradation is because, as I said, the permutation is ruined when the key stream is generated. And the bit prediction is just getting out of sync, and it happens when the index J is just getting out of sync. It hits a part that was already ruined. So we did the switch to finding not a pattern in the least significant bit, but a pattern in the difference between one least significant bit and the other, and the next least significant bit. And in this case, we got much better results. What you can see here, this is the blue line that is the previous one. As you can see, it vanishes around 35 to 40. However, the red one continues until essentially the 100th byte. So what we have here, this is for Q equals 1, meaning that this is for a single LSB. This is for Q equals 2, quite a similar picture. This is for Q equals 3. So it is essentially the same picture. We still have information. This pattern is kept for, and is expressed in the key stream, in the probabilities of the bits in the key stream for the first 100 bytes. So let's try to sum this up, okay? So when we're using the largest class, the one with a single least significant bit, and I'm thinking about the 16-byte keys of RC4. If you use shorter keys, you have a more severe problem. Then the first bit, the first LSB, can be predicted with a probability of 0.68. The 37th bit, which is also interesting when we're talking about TLS, can be predicted with a probability of 0.546. And the 100th bit can be predicted with a probability of 0.503. So the tracking of these patterns is possible for the 37th byte with an advantage over 1/2, that is 1 over 22. For the 68 byte, 1 over 64. For the 100 byte, we can track the pattern for with a probability of 1 over 330. So the bottom line of all this analysis, that when you're using RC4 and when you are hitting a weak key, then the first 100 LSBs are exposed to leakage. They can be leaked, and this leakage can be used to attack RC4. So I talked about the invariance thickness. Now we'll see how to take these observations. Most of them, as I said, are 13-year-old. The switch to the diff is something that is new, that we had to overcome in order to use this for the TLS protocol. So first, I will describe the attack scenario. This is a general scenario, but will repeat itself in the different versions, the different variants of the attack. So the attacker has to wait for a hit. A hit in this case is an RC4 key that is used, that is coming from this weak class. Once the hit occurred, the attacker identifies that it occurred, and and he uses the hit to identify the plaintext patterns. So he has to wait 2 to the 24 keys, 2 to the 24 attempts until he is hitting a weak key. Once that happens, then he has several dozens or maybe 100 hits to get a successful tracking. Because remember that when we have a weak key, we don't have in all the times the pattern being preserved. There is some probability, and this probability depends on what is the length that we're trying to obtain. So essentially, we will focus on a number that is 1 billion, just for the sake of simplicity. So we'll assume that the attacker needs 1 billion attempts in order to get a successful tracking. When that happens, the attacker predicts keystream least significant bit differences, and he can recover the corresponding plaintext LSBs. So we're talking about recovering LSB. It's just a leakage on the data that is encrypted. This is not the entire data. So what can you do with LSBs? Is this sufficient? Well, in some cases, it is not sufficient. It is not sufficient to mount a practical attack. In other cases, it is. So I'll give you several examples. The most, I think probably the most significant thing that you can do with LSBs is to accelerate different trial and error attacks. And usually when you use trial and error attack, then you are subject to a detector that just count your request and at some point decides to block you because they sent too many requests. So you can, using this, you can sneak below any threshold-based detectors. And one of the exampls that I'm going to discuss in detail is a dictionary attack on weak passwords. I took a database of weak passwords with some statistics. It is 2 or 3 years old, but still I think this is not very different from what is the situation as is today. And now the most important columns in this table is this column, which is the number of web accounts that this statistic says are using the top 100,000 and 10,000 most common passwords. And this one, which is the average case of how many attempts should I do if I already know the LSB of the password. So in this case, from 100 attempts, I reduce to 1.5. Meaning if I know the LSB of the password, then I only need 1 or 2 attempts until I get the correct one. If I know the password is from the top 1,000, then I only need 4 attempts. And if I know it is from the top 10,000, I still only need 18 attempts. So this is one thing that you can do with least significant bits to accelerate dictionary attacks on passwords. Another acceleration that can be done, consider the credit card numbers. And in credit card numbers, you have 16 digits. However, you don't have a full entropy of these 16 digits because the first six numbers are known, are identifiers of your bank, of the credit card company. The fourth suffix, the last four digits, are not very safe, not very secure, because it is they appear in many documents, so yeah, we cannot count on their security. And there's also a 1-byte checksum. So again, when you're having the least significant bits of all these 16 digits, then instead of needing 100,000 attempts, the number is reduced to 1,500, which is again a significant acceleration of trial and error attack. The next example is session cookies. Most of the attacks on SSL focus on session cookies because these are the natural victims. They have a lot of value. If you have the session cookie of someone, then you can do session hijacking and use his connection to his account. So in PHP session cookies, there are 32. There are different sizes that can be used. So essentially, I think the longest one is 32 characters. When it is 32 characters, then you can accelerate the brute force on such cookie by a factor of 2 to the 32, which is 4 billion. For ASP session cookies, it is 16 characters, and then you can reduce it in a factor of 2 to the 16. I'll start with the first attack, which is a man-in-the-middle attack. This is essentially the same setup that was used in the beast attack. I will talk about it in a few seconds. The attack requires that only a single hit will occur. And once it happens, then the first 100 first bytes are at risk, or information is leaked from them. This is the two advantages of this attack on previous attacks on TLS. There is also, of course, the downside that we only extract partial information. We don't extract it fully. Okay, so this is this setup, the setup of the beast attack. There is a user, there is an application server. The user logins to the application server, and then he gets a session cookie. The attacker is assumed to be in two locations, also is a man in the middle, and also is able to run a JavaScript code on the client. And at this point, this JavaScript generates a large number of requests. These requests never arrive to the application server because they are stopped by this man-in-the-middle part of the attacker. And essentially, after 1 billion connections, the attack succeeds. One important thing about this attack, that it is insensitive to resets, meaning that in the beast attack and the previous attacks on RC4 and the crime attack, you had to aggregate the information along the series of attempts. So meaning that you started aggregating information until at some point you have enough information and you recovered the session cookie. So in some of these attacks, you need that the key will remain fixed, which is not always the case. In other attacks, you need in all the attacks. I'm sorry. In all of these attacks, you need to rely on the fact that the session cookie that you're trying to steal will remain valid until you end this attack. And again, this is not always the case. However, our attack is not sensitive to resets. If you have a reset, I don't mind because and continue to wait for my hit. Once I get my hit, I don't mind if you had a 500 different session keys along my attempt. I only wait for a hit. Once I get a hit, I get success. So this is a very important attribute of this vulnerability and of this attack, of this scenario. And the next couple of attacks, I will show how it can be used to accelerate the attack and to work in different modes, in different setups that were considered secure until today. So the first one is a group attack. 1 billion TLS connections on a single on a single victim can take long. However, if I can put myself as a man in the middle between several users and the application, then I can try to attack all of them at once. Now, since the attack is insensitive to resets, then I don't need to aggregate. I don't mind that in some cases I'm working on one session cookie, on the one of this girl here, and on the other attempt I'm working on the session cookie of this girl. I just don't mind at all. And then this number of billion can be reduced by a factor of however, whatever is the number of users I can attack simultaneously. Now, the question is this possible? Well, this setup of man in the middle, the most typical ways to obtain that is by, just putting a Wi-Fi of your own and then let people connect to it. For example, in one of the malls around here. And then you are becoming a man in the middle for all of them. So it is very applicable for a group attack. Moreover, the other scenario is if you are able to have a DNS poisoning. And if you have DNS poisoning, then again, many people are getting to your site, to your application, instead of the real application. And then again, this is very applicable for group attack. So the first attack was same as the beast attack, but this one gives us a way to accelerate it, to work on several victims simultaneously, and eventually we will manage to attack one of them. The third variant of the attack is take this analysis or this change one step further. If I can hack, if I can use a group to accelerate the attack, why not using just all the users of an application? So consider, for example, that Facebook had used RC4. It doesn't use RC4. It used a couple of months ago, but today it is not used. If you try to connect to Facebook with a browser that supports only RC4, you will fail. I tried. So if you are able to be at the entrance to Facebook, then you can only listen, you can sniff on the line, you collect the data that you see until you see a hit. Now again, remember, we need 1 billion attempts. But if we're on the entrance to Facebook, then we will have this 1 billion attempts, meaning that we can scale this attack. I don't mind which of the users, that each of the users is using a different session cookie. I only need a single hit. Now, if I don't care about the fact that different users have different data, then I can not only target session cookies, I can also target passwords, because different users have different passwords. So the previous attacks, the Beast and the Royal Holloway attacks, they had to focus on session cookies because they need that the session cookie will be transmitted over and over. In this case, we are actually attacking only in sniffing mode. We are a passive attacker, not a man in the middle, which is much more easier to obtain. 1 billion is a large number, but when you're looking at the statistics of Facebook, they have daily about 900 million daily active users. Each one of them probably has several logins. So this is, okay, you can say we are listening to Facebook, and every day we can hack the accounts of like 4 or maybe 10 users. So maybe this is not a large number, but it is significant. It means that we can do something with this attack. People are using SSL to protect their data. They should be, they want to know that the data is secure. Now, I will end with, this is not an attack, but it's mainly a concern or an observation. Every time you're sending your secret over a TLS connection that is using RC4, actually you have 1 to the 16 million probability to get a bad key. And you have 1 to a billion chance to leak a significant portion of quite many bits of your data. Now, these numbers are small. However, they are definitely not negligible. Remember that the statistics of TLS today talks about 30% of the TLS connections in the world being used with RC4. So this is a significant number. We're talking about billions and billions of connections maybe even every hour, definitely every day. And some part of this part is not negligible, are vulnerable to such attacks. Okay, so what is the conclusion of this research? First, we show that the invariance weakness in RC4 can be used to mount new attacks on TLS, new attacks on TLS when using RC4. Second, we show that this attribute of this attack, that it is insensitivity to reset, it opens the door to new attack scenarios, to group attacks and to sniffing attacks. And we demonstrated the first passive attack on TLS, at least the first to my knowledge. The conclusion, well, RC4 is not a secure cipher. However, it can hardly be said as a conclusion because these are quite old news. The initialization mechanism of RC4 is very weak. I would even say extremely weak, but this is also old news. I think the most important news is that the impact of these facts that are known on the security of systems that use RC4 is currently seems to be underestimated. Meaning that there is, this cipher is known to be weak for like 13 years, and it is still used in 30% of the TLS connections. So this is not a good number. So my conclusion is that RC4 should be removed, should be disabled in many systems by browsers, by servers, by everyone. I will finish with some. Just a second. Okay, I will finish with some links. This is news from the last weeks, the last month. So the first one is that about a week ago, a new attack was published on RC4 when used in TLS. It detects the situation where it is using the IMAP protocol for protecting mail communication. So the attackers were able to demonstrate how in this protocol, passwords are being encrypted over and over. so they were able to attack passwords. Another thing that was changed is this. You can see this. This is RFC 7465, which was published about a month ago by the IETF. It is called it's titled the Prohibiting RC4 Cipher Suites. And the last one is, and the last one is statistics that I got from this morning, where you can see that the usage of RC4 has reduced to the 23.5% that I showed you that was from 2 weeks ago into 22. So the direction is positive. There is already in RFC an acceptance that RC4 should be removed for SSL. Now, the only thing is just to actually do it. Thank you. Okay, the question was how many plaintext bytes are needed in order to recover a key. Now, the answer is that, as I showed, the weakness and the leakage is on the first 100 bytes of the encryption, meaning that if you are waiting just for encrypting a large amount of data, you will not get what you want. You cannot get a weak key because the key remains the same one. So you have to attack you can attack the first 100 bytes from a large number of TLS connections, each one of them using a different key.
So, assuming that we can intercept a large number of the whole transmission between the client and the server, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we also can infer a portion of those bytes with the location of those bytes, which we know the plain text for those, right? Can we get back to the key in a reasonable amount of?
Well, what you can do, you can know the number of bits that make it a weak key. Meaning that in that case, you will know 24 bits of the key. So you're waiting for a weak key to occur. Once it occurred, you know that it is a weak key, so you know 24 bits of this key. All the LSBs in the first byte and
Okay.
You gave an example of Facebook that it has disabled RC4. Right? Do you have any statistics in terms of how many websites, maybe like the top 100, 1,000, are using RC4?
The question was who is using RC4 essentially and who is not. I noticed that Facebook had disabled RC4. I heard that I think PayPal and Twitter also disabled RC4. So I think this is good news. I think the industry is going to the right direction. But still, there is this number of 30% which fails to degrade. Okay, thank you.